Happy Christmas, Theo. I'm sorry that Great Uncle Neil can't be with you this Christmas, but I will see you soon. In the meantime, I'm going to read you a story, you and Big Ted and Little Ted, a story called The Snow Queen. So get all comfy and settle down and I'll begin. The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen. Long ago, there was a very wicked sprite, and for fun, he made a magic mirror. In it, anything that was good and beautiful had an evil and ugly reflection. The sprite ran about with the mirror, laughing at how horrible he could make people and places look. But suddenly, the mirror slipped out of his hands. It smashed into 1 billion pieces, tinier than grains of sand, and the wind blew them all over the world. A little boy called Kay was looking at a picture book with his friend from next door, Gerda, when suddenly he cried out, "Oh, I've got something in my eye." He blinked and winked, but he couldn't see anything. I think it's out now," Kay said, but it wasn't. He had got one of the pieces from the magic mirror stuck in his eye. Little did Kay know, anything beautiful now appeared ugly to him. Very quickly, Kay became bitter and cruel. He no longer wanted to play with Gerda, and he teased her nastily when she got upset. One day, thick snow began to fall. Gerda looked out of her window and saw Kay with other boys from their street carrying their sledges. They were off to play in the marketplace. There the boys took turns tying their sledges onto the back of a horse-drawn cart so they would be pulled along and get a good ride. No one except Kay seemed to notice a large horse-drawn sleigh glide into the square. The sleigh was gleaming white and the driver was a woman, all wrapped up in a white fur coat and cap. Kay did not know it, but she was the wicked Snow Queen. "Come and warm up my sleigh," she coaxed. Kay looked back at the other boys, but they were all busy playing. It was as if they couldn't see him or the fine sleigh and the beautiful lady. Turning away from them, Kay climbed in. The Snow Queen wrapped her fur cloak around him and kissed his forehead. And with that magic kiss, Kay quite forgot his home, his family, and his little friend, Gerda. The Snow Queen cracked the whip, and they were off like the wind into the whirling snowflakes. The sleigh lifted, and Kay realised that they were flying, not sliding. On they rushed through the icy air, all the way to the far north and the Snow Queen's palace. There, Kay stayed with the Snow Queen, under her wicked spell, having forgotten everything he had once known. How worried everyone was when Kay didn't come back. Nobody had any idea what had happened to him. Days went by and turned into weeks, which turned into months. Finally, Kay's family sadly decided that he must have fallen into the river and drowned. But his little friend Gerda didn't believe it. Early one morning she thought, "I'll go and ask the river myself." Off she went to the river bank and cried out, "Is it true that you have taken my friend? If you have, give him back." It seemed as though the blue waves were nodding and beckoning to her. So Gerda stepped into a boat which lay among the rushes, untied the rope and let it drift out into the current. "Perhaps the river will carry me to Kay," she thought, and she tried not to be frightened. The boat swept out of the town and through the countryside until the sun was high in the sky. Then it bumped into a riverbank right by a little cottage. An old woman came out and helped Gerda onto dry land. Gerda asked if the old woman had seen or heard of Kay. "I haven't, my dear," the old woman replied, "but do go and ask the flowers in my garden. You never know, they may know something." Gerda wandered around the cottage garden, asking the daisies and tulips and the roses if they'd seen Kay. Sadly, they all shook their heads. When Gerda came to the far end of the garden, she found a little rusty gate. She shook the bolt loose, then pushed the gate open and stepped through. To her surprise, she discovered that the whole summer had passed. Outside the gate, the leaves on the trees were yellow and orange and red. It was now autumn. And Gerda stood in astonishment. Some nearby wood pigeons called out, "Coo, coo! We have seen little Kay. He was sitting in the sleigh of the Snow Queen." They were no doubt on their way to the palace in Lapland. "Which way should I go?" cried the brave little girl. "Ask the reindeer over there," cooed the wood pigeons. Gerda looked and saw a stately reindeer standing at the edge of the forest. "Do you know where the Snow Queen's palace is in Lapland?" she asked. "Of course I do," said the animal. "I was born and bred in Lapland. Jump on my back and I will take you." So Gerda clambered on, held tight to his mighty antlers, and off they flew, through the forest and over snowy mountains until they arrived in Lapland. The reindeer took Gerda right up to the Snow Queen's glittering frost palace. She slipped off the reindeer's back, so chilled that she could barely speak to say thank you. Determined to be brave, Gerda crept into the palace. She found herself in an empty, endless, snowy hall, and there before her sat little Kay. He was all alone, for the Snow Queen had flown away on her sleigh to spread winter all around the world. Gerda ran to Kay in joy, but to her horror, he was quite blue with cold. He didn't realize it at all, for he was under the Snow Queen's spell. He just sat there making patterns in the snow with an icicle. "Kay," whispered, putting her arms around him gently, "don't you remember me?" Still Kay sat numb and motionless with the cold. Then Gerda began to cry. Her warm tears fell on Kay and melted away the Snow Queen's icy kiss. Kay slowly began to remember his little friend and his family, and he burst into tears too. "Gerda, where have you been for so long? And where am I? And why is it so cold?" Kay wept so much that the splinter of mirror in his eye was washed out. "The Snow Queen took you prisoner," Gerda explained. "Now quick, we must escape before she comes back." Hand in hand, they ran out of the vast hall, jumped on the faithful reindeer's back, and were off over snowy mountains and meadows, all the way back to the gates of their town. As the reindeer trotted away, the children took each other's hand. They turned to look at each other and realized they were grown up. From that moment on, they only ever remembered the Snow Queen as though they had been dreaming.